It's like hiring a referee and then letting him bet on the game he's officiating. Not illegal on paper, not against the rules, technically, but would you trust the outcome? Because that's the question sitting quietly inside this hearing room. And it's a question that Congressman Joe Neguse doesn't ask loudly. He asks it precisely. This is not a normal hearing. This is a moment where the paper trail walks into the room before the witness even speaks. Across from him sits Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, the man he responsible for enforcing federal law, now being asked about something far less dramatic but far more uncomfortable: his own financial decisions. Neguse doesn't start with accusation. He starts with confirmation. AU's periodic transaction report, filed in July, required under ethics rules. And Patel acknowledges it. Yes, he divested over $100,000 in stocks. That's what the system expects. That's what the public assumes. But then the frame shifts, because buried in that same filing are two more entries. Two purchases, two dates, two decisions that reopen the entire question. May 9th, May 12th. Not ancient history, not before the job, while in it. Between $50,000 and $50,000 into a national coffee chain. Between $50,000 and $100,000 into a semiconductor company. And suddenly, yes, this isn't about what was cleaned up. It's about what was started again. Neguse doesn't interrupt. He tightens. He asks the question that sounds simple but isn't. Are these transactions that you're doing personally? And Patel answers with a process. Not a justification, a process. He submits proposals. The Department of Justice reviews them. The FBI reviews them. Then they say yes or no. Then the trade happens. Clean, structured, approved. But listen closely to what's missing. There's no answer about necessity, no answer about restraint, no answer about why someone in this position would continue trading individual stocks at all. Instead, Patel offers something ordinary, almost too ordinary. He follows industries. He thought they were good investments. That's the language of a retail investor, not the language of the director of the FBI. And this is where the tension stops being technical and becomes ethical. Because the system he describes is built to prevent conflict. But Neguse isn't pointing at conflict. He's pointing at perception. And perception doesn't need proof, it only needs proximity. And now the tone shifts, not louder, sharper. Because Congressman Joe Neguse makes something very clear. This is not a gotcha moment, which is exactly why it lands harder. For years, he says, there has been a bipartisan effort to ban stock trading for members of Congress and senior executive officials. Not because every trade is illegal, but because the system itself creates a permanent question mark. And here's where the receipts start stacking. A July filing, an ethics agreement with the Department of Justice, a required divestment of over $100,000 in various holdings, followed within the same reporting window by new purchases on May 9th and May 12th. Sell to comply, buy to continue, legally consistent, logically fractured. Because if the purpose of divestment is to eliminate even the appearance of impropriety, then continuing to trade individual stocks doesn't resolve the issue. It reintroduces it in a different form. That's not speculation. That's structural contradiction. And Patel's defense doesn't close that gap. It exposes it. I thought they would be a good investment. That sentence works for a private citizen. It collapses under the weight of a public office that sits at the intersection of intelligence, enforcement, and timing. Because here's what isn't said, what never gets said out loud. No one is alleging insider trading. No one is claiming a crime. But the entire system of public trust is built on something stricter than legality. It's built on distance. Distance between power and profit. Distance between access and advantage. Distance between knowing and acting. And when that distance shrinks, even perfectly legal behavior starts to look negotiated. Now, zoom out. This isn't just about Kash Patel. This is about a recurring pattern across government, where officials operate inside rules that were designed for compliance, not for confidence. Because compliance says, was this approved? But confidence asks, should this even exist? And that's the question Nagusa is really placing on the record. Not whether Patel broke a rule, but whether the rules themselves are enough. Because imagine explaining this to someone outside Washington. The person in charge of enforcing federal law is allowed to trade individual stocks as long as he asks permission first. That's not corruption, but it doesn't sound clean either. And in a system where trust is already fragile, that distinction matters more than ever. Because the public doesn't audit ethics agreements, they react to what feels fair. And right now, this doesn't feel settled. And this is where it stops being about forms and starts being about consequences. Because outside that hearing room, there are people who don't get a review board. Pause. No DOJ clearance. No internal ethics process. They follow the law, or they face it. That's the contrast. On one side, Kash Patel with access, structure, approval pipelines. On the other, ordinary citizens expected to trust that the system above them is not just legal, but clean. And here's the moral fracture. When the person enforcing the rules operates inside exceptions that the public doesn't understand, trust doesn't break loudly, it erodes quietly. No scandal headline, no smoking gun, just a slow shift from confidence to doubt. Because the real question was never answered. Not was it approved, but why continue at all? Why step back from $100,000 in holdings for ethics and then step right back in through new positions? Why maintain exposure in a role that demands distance? That silence matters more than any sentence spoken. Because in law enforcement, perception is not cosmetic, it is currency. And once the public starts questioning whether that currency is being protected, everything else weakens with it. So here's the question that doesn't stay in that room. If the system allows this, and everyone follows the rules, but it still doesn't feel right, then is the problem the people or the rules themselves? If moments like this matter to you, where power is examined, not shouted over, make sure you like, comment your view, share this breakdown, and subscribe, because this isn't where it ends.